Right then, people, we're back inside the building. How are we doing this morning? Just gone 16 minutes past 8 here on Trickstar Radio, and we are moving into today's very special Friday interview. Normally, we keep the interviews from Monday to Thursday, but you know what? As this one is a catch-up and it's a friend of the show, I definitely thought, you know what, let's squeeze this one in. I'm looking forward to it very much. So a man like Boca 45 is on the line. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm wicked. It's great to get you back on the show. We were just saying off air there before we came online, it's mad that it's been a whole year.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely flown by, hasn't it, this year, bearing in mind with everything else going on. But, yeah, I'm onto the next album. I think the last time I was on, I was talking about the 45 album.
Yeah, but definitely, that was it.
Now we're on to this one.
I mean, just kind of looking back then, just so we can get a bit of a recap of kind of what you've been up to. How was the response in the end to that album, looking back on it from the perspective now?
It was good. It was obviously on an American label called Mass Appeal, which is owned by Nas, and so there was a little bit of back and forth over the Atlantic type of stuff, and weirdly there was a bit of UK US sort of misunderstanding of certain things, but they did a good job of it, and people seemed to really like it, and ended up on some really good playlists, and the vinyl sold, so it was good. We had some good radio support, and did a load of festivals, and yeah, so it was good. It worked out really, really well. It ended up on some of the tracks ended up on some adverts, so I suppose you couldn't ask for much more.
Definitely, man. I mean, the list keeps getting longer of what actually happened with it.
I'm reminding myself, actually. I can't actually remember.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad to see it did so well, because obviously we had you on the show back then. Kind of talking through the release quite specifically, and obviously the different tracks involved. Something I always like to ask when I get people on for the second time is, do you ever kind of find yourself revisiting old works for sort of like updated remixes and things like that?
Do you know what? I don't very often at all, because I like to look forward. I really like to just see what's in front of me. I think dwelling on the past can be a little bit dangerous, especially if you're, like I write music every day. So I think if I look back on stuff, I would either dwell on what I didn't do right, or think about how I should replicate other things. So I think as a writer, I tend not to do that very, very much.
Okay, no, that makes sense, man. And this is why I like asking the question, because so many people have kind of different answers to that. Obviously, we get so many different people on the show from sort of different areas and different sounds and different genres. It's always interesting to hear how people kind of look back at their own catalogue, because as you say, that feeling of nostalgia can get it can be quite a dangerous thing. But then the interesting thing with your sound, obviously, is there's so much kind of, I want to say, nostalgic influence. There's so much sort of jazz and funk in there. There's so much sort of hip hop influence in there as well, which naturally tend to lend themselves as genres to be quite nostalgic. How do you kind of fight that battle when you're in that production phase of making sure stuff still sounds modern but still has that sort of nostalgic glint that we all love?
I just like to keep things, like, musically. I like things which are organic, and I like to keep my production quite organic. So, if there's a little bit of if there's a mistake in there, then I tend to, I think automatically now with technology, you can get rid of those little blips and those little bumps and stuff. But I kind of have to, I leave that stuff in, because I like those bits. I tend not to, make everything clean and tidy, basically. And I think that's what gives organic music that kind of feel. It's like that. You don't hear music like it's in blocks. I always call certain things like that block music, so you could almost see it in WAV files.
Yeah, of course.
Do you know what I mean? So I like to think of that. If you saw my music, hopefully you could see the sort of pits and troughs in there's, as a file, it would look like it changed. It went up and down basically. But I try and just keep things free, and just keep my ears open, and just just keep trusting my ears, so to speak.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. I can definitely hear that. It's something that is quite. It's one of the things that keeps sounds like yours very much. Keeps them quite vibrant. You know, that idea of almost perfect imperfection. It's the actual imperfections that give stuff its kind of charm more than anything else. And I feel that's something that definitely does get lost a bit in the more sort of digital side of production quite often. But I mean, kind of with that then, obviously moving from the previous album into the production phase for the current project, which we currently seen you working on. When did work on this new project officially start?
I suppose it was like halfway through last year. So the recording process tends to sort of be 6 months before it all starts. So I suppose midway through last year, I was thinking about what to do this year, and I saw it visually as 2020, and I thought, because there's 2 zeros in 2020, I thought we could kind of incorporate donuts into those zeros. So obviously there's a lot of 7 inches and, you know, that sort of stuff which ties in with what I do. So I thought it'd be a nice way of releasing a series of 7 inches throughout the year, and then so every other month, and then at the end of it do where we're at now, which is release the album. So I needed to do a lot of work leading up to it because I needed to stockpile tunes. So Powerful, which is a track with Hannah Williams, and the other track Sparky Evans, were probably the first 2 things I worked on. And then so they sort of, I worked on them bit by bit throughout the year, released 7 inches. So I started middle of last year on this project.
Okay, cool. So a fair amount of time's gone into it, and I think that's something that always rings very true with your projects when they sort of land. You know, when they actually finish up and they're in the stores, you can tell a lot of work's go into them. There's always a lot of there's always a really eclectic feel to them. There's a lot of different sounds and influences that always seem to kind of populate the projects. What we're going to do next then is we're going to start to move forward into one of the newer ones. This one goes by the name of Strawberry Hill. So I've got a funny feeling there's going to be a lot to talk about this. So talk me through how this one came together.
Well, this one was the last one I actually did. So this one I wrote was the last track on the album, and it's the last track which I wrote. And I spent tons of time on this tune, and I actually did it at the start of lockdown version 1. So I had a couple of tracks left to do on the app. Well, 1 track left to do, and I think this track probably took me longer to do than any other track I've ever worked on. So and I did it throughout lockdown for about, I suppose it took me about 3 months to complete this track.
Wow. I mean, why was it the one that took so long? Like, what got in the way?
I wanted it to take that long, actually. Like, weirdly, I'm normally one of those producers that just like get a vibe, get it done, get it out, you know, get it mixed, get on with it. But I quite enjoyed the process of, you know, we were in lockdown. It wasn't like this lockdown we're in at the moment where everything was literally, you know, the first one, everything was closed and we were told to stay at home and everything. So I quite enjoyed I did it in little sort of 10-second segments, or even 5 seconds. I would do 5 or 10 seconds every day. I'd go into the studio, do a little bit, and then it became like a musical patchwork quilt. So there's loads of little sections, there's loads of stuff going on, and I just hope that it doesn't get lost at the end of the album, you know, that people go, that's a bit of a weird track, you know. But it's like, it was where my head was at that time. So for me, it was a good way of documenting lockdown number 1, really. I think. Cool.
I think that leads on nicely to what we're going to be talking about in the second section. We're going to be talking about kind of lockdown, how it's affected you from a production angle, because I know you're very much about the studio sort of sessions. You're very much about the live elements within tune. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. We are going to get into this one now. It goes by the name of Strawberry Hill. It's just gone at 25 minutes past 8 here. We are live on Trickstar Radio. Man like Boca 45 is on the line. Just so people are aware, what's the best way to get hold of you on the Insta?
Well, all the normal channels of Instagram. I've got an Instagram page, and then there's a Facebook page and Twitter as well. So any of those social media platforms you can see me on.
Wicked, man. Well, we're going to get into this one now then. Keep it locked, people. It's Breakfast with Coke.
Breakfast with CubCamTV.
Trickstar Radio.